Hi friends, Mindy here. I have a new Bible to share with you today. This is a new product that is released from Crossway. They sent this Bible to me for review, and this is their new spiral bound journaling Bible. So this is an ESV version Bible, and the way that they have it set up is it's not all the whole Bible in one big spiral. It's actually split up into 5. So you have the Pentateuch, you have the history books, you have poetry, prophets, and New Testament. This one is the New Testament, and this is what they sent me. I'm very excited. Now, typically, I read from King James Version Bible. That's just my preferred Bible to study from. However, I do use an ESV interleaved Bible for a lot of my Bible journaling, and so I'm very excited to have a note taker kind of version of this Bible, of the ESV version, so that for note taking or for Bible journaling, you know, kind of either way, whether if you're like a more artistic Bible journaler, it will work. If you are literally just, you know, taking notes and writing your thoughts down, or sermon notes or prayers or whatever, it was going to work for you for that as well. So the first thing that I really, really love about this spiral Bible is this spiral on it itself. The actual coil is really, really sturdy, and I really appreciate that. I have other spiral Bibles that are not quite as strong or as sturdy, and you feel like you're kind of crushing them. So I really love the spiral on this. Also, the size is about 8.5 by 11, typical like note paper size. So it's a good size. It has a 9.5 point font, or 9.5 font in it, so it's very easy to read. The font in it's not too small. I have other Bibles, you know, that when they're trying to make up for the room in the margin, the font just gets smaller and smaller, and it makes it really difficult to read, which thereby makes it more difficult to take notes in. So you also have, it's basically a 3-inch line area here, but it ends up being about 3.5 inches from text to the edge of the page. So not as wide as maybe like the Dayspring version, which I think is like 4 inches maybe, but plenty of space for note taking, plenty of space for artwork if that's how you prefer to do this. The pages in it are like a light cream. They're not as yellow as some journaling Bibles that I have seen, which I appreciate. It's just a nice light cream, but they are not the bright white that I have seen in other spiral bound journaling Bibles. And so again, this is just the New Testament version. And so you have, you know, your table of contents in the beginning. You have a little bit of a preface here that's talking about the ESV version, specifically how it was translated, different things like that. And the resources and stuff that they used, some footnotes and things like that if you're really interested in how the ESV version in here. And of course you have plenty of white space if you want to, you know, even do some pen testing and that kind of stuff up in these first pages. Another thing that I really, really appreciate is that the actual space over here is left open, so you don't have any of the big names of the books kind of written down the side or whatever. So you do have this full page, and like I said, it's a single column, 9.5 font, very, very easy to read. So I really, really like that. I don't mind the light cream color. I do sometimes when I'm doing art kind of prefer a white page, but that's just a preference. I will also say that the lines in this they're pretty light, and so that's good for you if you like to do artwork. I really feel like you could do your artwork right over the top of it, and you're just not even going to notice the lines, but they're also, you know, substantial enough that you can definitely see them to take your notes. It's very easy to see, very easy to write on. It's a good spacing. The lines are not too short, you know, too narrow. And I have another Bible, that my very, very first journaling Bible, that is lined on the margins, and the lines are much darker. And even at that, you know, by the time you do the artwork and stuff in there, they kind of fade to the back, but they're not as light as this. So this is really good kind of compromise between still being able to have some lines that you can keep your notes nice and neat, or also being able to do some of your artwork. So everything through here is obviously you know, Matthew to Revelation. And then in the back, there is just an extra page where I did a bunch of pen testing. I put most of my favorite pens down in the bottom. Hopefully you can see that, just to kind of see what it would do. There's some product, I mean, it reacted pretty much like I was expecting it to for everything. So my favorite pen by far to use for Bible journaling is a Sharpie S Gel. So that's the first one that I did. But you can see I tested all kinds of pens. I tested a Tombow like Sign, like Fudanowski, Pentel Sign, a Sharpie roller, Faber-Castell Microns. I tested Tool pens, Pilots. I even did a Posca paint marker and the Sharpie Creative markers in here as well. Obviously, I was not expecting those to bleed through because they're acrylic markers. But I also did some other types of, like I did a Flare. I did an Ink Joy, which sometimes gel pens can tend to bleed through, but these were fine. The Uni Emotes. I had some Zebra Click Arts, some mild liners, some Sharpie highlighters. All of those pens you can see down here, while they may have shadowed just like slightly, none of them really bled through. I even tested a Faber-Castell dual brush marker, and it was just fine. And I tried to do some like darker colors. So I was doing like dark blues and purples and this brown, just to kind of see what would happen in terms of writing. So if you're just, you know, writing, I feel like you could feel very confident in using your favorite pens. I did even some Ink Joys. I think I said that. The only thing I didn't test were my fountain pens. Sometimes those can be, those can bleed through just because they're super fluid, but I did not test one of those. But and then I went into the common inks that I use for stamping. So I started off with Archival in a brown, which is ground espresso. I have Archival in black soot. I used VersaFine in onyx black. And then I went into the distress inks. Now, I was not expecting these to bleed through. They did shadow just a little bit. The VersaFine got a little bit darker. Sometimes those can bleed through, especially if it's a newer ink pad. You might see some bleeding from those. I did not even bother with the StazOn because StazOn is a solvent and it's going to bleed through. So I already knew that. I don't typically use a StazOn in my Bible journaling unless I've done some acrylic paint or, you know, sealed my page first. I just don't tend to use StazOn very often anyway. So, but then I also did Distress ink and Distress Oxide ink. And so you can kind of see the Distress ink definitely started to bleed through. My Oxide, not so much, but it was also not my juiciest ink pad. But definitely if you're going to add water to those are probably going to bleed through. So there's obviously ways that you can deal with bleed through if you are like to do art in your Bible. And because you have, if you're keeping it over to the side, it'd be very easy to just come through on the back side and add some gesso and cover it up and then, you know, start over. Obviously the gesso is going to be white, so that would be maybe something that you would want to consider. But for me, I don't really worry about bleed through in my Bibles. That's just not something I'm too terribly concerned about. But especially if I'm, you know, trying to stay in a margin, because there's always ways you can add paper, you can add all kinds of things to cover those kinds of things up. So another thing that I did test that I wanted to see how it would work were some watercolors, because obviously this is not watercolor paper, and I love how watercolor reacts in my interleaved, but in other spiral Bibles that I have had, it's not been the best paper for watercolor. And so what I have noticed is there are a couple tricks. So I tested my Daniel Smith watercolor here. I have a Distress watercolor crayon where I scribbled it out and then I tried to blend it out with some water, and then I used my Distress crayon. Excuse me, I wrote that this is a watercolor crayon, but it's actually a watercolor pencil. So anyway, I just scribbled that out and then I tried to blend it out with my water brush, and it worked okay. I felt like it started to pill the paper up just a little bit. Obviously it didn't bleed because, you know, watercolor, once it dries, it doesn't usually do that. But the Distress crayon, I did the same thing. I kind of scribbled that on there. It went on beautifully. It did, as you kind of trying to move it with the water, it does tend to pill the paper just a little bit, which is pretty typical for these types of papers. But what I noticed is if you take that paper like I did with the Daniel Smith and you actually take the watercolor first and apply it where you're not having to kind of work it into the paper, it does not pill at all. And so it blended on smoothly. That's what I did here with the watercolor or the distress crayon. I took it straight from the tip of the distress crayon with my water brush. I just used a water brush like this. I took it straight from the tip, applied it on here, and it went on smoothly and beautifully. So I think you could probably even do the same thing with a baby wipe, and which I have done before. It's actually one of my favorite ways to use distress crayons in a Bible, is just putting it on a baby wipe and then just covering it. So I did not actually test that on here, but judging from how this part worked, it's going to work the same way. And this is Uncharted Mariner, so this is a pretty dark color, and you can see it didn't, and it hardly even really wrinkled. Of course, you are going to get some wrinkling anytime you add water. And I will say that, you know, a note-taking Bible is probably not meant for watercoloring, but you can certainly do that. And the paper is a heavier paper, so it's going to be a little bit heavier than what you would have like in an actual Bible, you know, to stand up to the strength of the rings and everything, and you know, moving it back and forth. But I don't feel like they're not going to tear out easily. The paper is a good weight. I don't know the actual weight of the paper, but it feels good. It's nice and smooth paper, so you're going to be able to write with your favorite pens in here. You're going to be able to do even some coloring, using some highlighters, using, you know, whatever. I would suggest, you know, because everybody's different, because some people may be more heavy-handed, and some people, you know, whatever products you have at your home, just flip it to the back page and just try it out if you're worried about it. It's the best way to learn how your Bible is going to react to some of your favorite products or some of your favorite techniques. You may want to add, you know, collage medium over the top of a page, or matte gel medium or matte medium, just to kind of seal the page and then do your artwork on top of it. Certainly you can do that if you want to prep your pages. I don't usually do that, but you can, that's certainly an option. But if you're just straight note taking, you know, you're going to have plenty of space to take your beautiful notes in here. And I don't really have a pen that would even bled through. So it really took all of the inks that I have personally really well. I will say, you know, there are different levels of shadowing, like I said, but none of it was so offensive that, you know, I wouldn't use it in those pens. So all in all, I'm very excited to use this journal, this journaling Bible, and I'm hoping I will be able to get, you know, the other sets in the collection, because like I said, I started with the New Testament. I'm hoping I can get, you know, into poetry and those as well. I love the color of it. It's just very simple cover, but again, I really like how sturdy. I don't know if you can hear. It's a pretty sturdy cover, which I'm actually really excited about. So anyway, like I said, the last I checked, they did have some of these in stock at By the Will for God. So I will put my affiliate link down below. Thank you for those of you who use that link. It really does help me out, and I appreciate that so much. If you have any questions, if there's something you would like to see, a pen maybe that I didn't try, or if you have tried one, you know, feel free to leave all that information down in the comments. If you liked this video, I would really appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And until next time, bye.